Hello and welcome to Coffee House Shots. I'm Lucy Dunn and today I'm joined by James Heale and former Labour advisor John McTernan. Today marks 5 years since Keir Starmer became leader of the Labour Party, succeeding Jeremy Corbyn, purging the Labour left and going on to win the 2024 general election last July. James, can you talk us through some of the standout changes Starmer has made to the Labour Party over the last 5 years?
Sure. So I think that maybe you could say that Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party falls into maybe three categories. The first being the period from April 2020 to about September 2021, in which he was very much struggling to make his mark on that party for two reasons, one of which there was simply so much to sort out after the chaos of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. So that meant just sort of basic stuff like going through, looking at people who be members. Of course, the EHRC had said that Labour was an institutionally anti-Semitic organisation. So that was very much making Labour actually fit to be a proper and governing party of this country again. But the other reason why he struggled, of course, was the COVID pandemic at that period. It was very hard for any of the opposition to really cut through at the time when political debate was just such an unknown period. So that was the first period of his Labour leadership. The second bit of his Labour leadership was from about, say, September 2021, when Labour starts overtaking the Conservatives in the polls following the Owen Paterson row, to July last year. So about 2.5 years where polls show Labour in the lead. And from about September 2022 onwards, he opens up a margin such that it's never going to be likely the Conservatives can win, because you have the trust money budget, you have the Boris Johnson implosion, and then you have Rishi Sunak's, shall we say, less than full fat offer on policy. And so for all different reasons, the red wall was gone, the fiscal discipline that mantra had been lost, and a lot of the sort of factors that played into the 2019 victory for the Tories meant that they weren't going to be the next time around. So that's the second period. And then the third period of Keir Starmer's leadership, I'd say, is probably from July last year, when he becomes Prime Minister and actually gets into government. And in terms of his finest moments, perhaps, I think, obviously taking the stand against Jeremy Corbyn was a key moment, breaking with the past, and that's always difficult, when you come in, as he was, as a soft left, acceptable, electable Corbynism in some respects, making those 10 pledges. So there was that moment. There was also, I think, the way in which he's had recently, his ability to stand up on the world stage is something that's won him a lot of plaudits. But the difficult bits obviously were Hartlepool, when I think he almost lost the Labour leadership, and that's been now confirmed subsequently in accounts like Get In by Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogrund. But I think it's been overall a pretty successful 5-year leadership. And as I said this morning, I wrote on Twitter, I said, only two men of the past 80 years in the post-war era have gone from having a working majority government of one complexion to a working government majority of another complexion. Those were Ted Heath in 1970 and now Keir Starmer in 2024, and she just fell short of Tony Blair's sort of Pyongyang majorities of 1997 and 2001, but Keir Starmer's majority is a testament to the work and discipline he's done over the past 5 years as Labour leader.
And John, as James mentioned, there's been a number of challenges facing Starmer over the last 5 years, and he's been criticised himself for previous U-turns and breaking earlier promises that he's made. And YouGov polling today has suggested that the public are less clear now than they were before the election about what Keir Starmer stands for. Do you think Starmer has become less principled over his time as Labour leader?
So you have to say, and I think James gave a good account of it, that what Keir Starmer has done for the Labour Party is an incredible achievement, an unbelievable achievement. It took Labour from 1983 to 1997, 14 years and 3 leaders to recover from a devastating election. It took Keir Starmer one electoral cycle, 4 years, 5 years. And that is the scale of the achievement. Labour doesn't recover well from defeat. Labour normally takes two or three terms out of office. Same with the Tory party by and large. And so Keir's achievement electorally is a tribute to the way he changed the party, changed the perceptions of the party, and more importantly, changed the perceptions of the government. Look, the government helped. There's no doubt this trust put a lot of effort into it, into losing it, but the election for the Tories, but so did Boris Johnson as well. So that's a huge achievement. I think to say, do we know who Keir Starmer is? I think on the international stage, absolutely. I think there are two Keirs. There's international Keir and domestic Keir. Keir came to be an MP, came to the office of Prime Minister as a man not experienced in government, but a man experienced being a civil servant, a reforming civil servant in the DPP, and also helping to reform the police service in Northern Ireland. but he also came as a man with an international track record, campaigning to abolish the death penalty, a lot of work in the Caribbean, but a man of principle working externally, internationally. And I think you see his comfort in any international audience. You never think he's an interloper. You think, oh yeah, he fits in. So there's something about his being there. And there's something about him and David Lammy and John Healey. They work in lockstep, not because they're politically similar, not even because they talk a lot, but because they've agreed to get behind David Lammy's project, which is progressive realism. The Labour Party internationally will be progressive, but it will start where it starts. And I think the Ukraine conflict's a great one. He knew what to do and what to say. He knew to cut aid and put it into defence. He knew instinctively that the voters would like that because soft power and hard power are two sides of the same coin. You don't see the same confidence, I think, in Keir, domestically, in domestic policy. Is there a similar doctrine for domestic reform? Well, Bridget Phillipson's reforms in education are different from Wes's in health, and different from Shabana's in justice, different from Angela Rayner's in the workplace, and also in housing and planning. So that there's something of when you come into office after such a short period, you've not done all the work. You can't have done all the work particularly with, as James points out, nearly 2 years of your leadership, you can't even meet the public because of COVID, and you can't criticise the government because of the national emergency. The work that wasn't done on domestic policy, that's where the strains are, that's where the push and pull in the government are at the moment, and that has to be gripped in a way. That has to come to, there has to be a conclusion. What is the purpose of this government domestically, the Starmer government domestically, or is it simply the political arm of Treasury?
So we've discussed previous elections, but I suppose looking forward to the local elections happening next month. James, Labour has staged its local election campaign launch in Chesterfield yesterday. What was Starmer's message to voters ahead of the elections next month?
Well, it was a very low-key launch, I'd say, and I think that it was very much emphasising, the importance of having good public services. But I think that really, Labour is not going to be the main story of this local elections in many ways, and that's something they're very happy about. Look, we'll have the Runcorn by-election. It's obviously difficult to look at polling in that respect, but it looks like Reform will win that. But I think much more the story is going to be about Conservative losses, because it's the county council elections. There are 20 local authorities run by the Conservatives up for grabs this time. So I think that Labour will be happy that they'll have a relatively low-key local elections, and actually I think a lot of the minister's time right now is just firefighting on the international front in terms of responding to what's happening in terms of those tariffs. Today we had the announcement that China is going to impose 34% tariffs, additional tariffs on America. And so really, the line from Number 10 in the lobby today was just that we're going to have international engagement over the weekend. So a lot of it is just taken up with stuff abroad. Over the next few weeks or so, I suspect that Labour will be happy that they're not going to be focusing much on the local election so much, and I do think we'll see more of that Whitehall reform. I agree with a lot of what John just said now, but I do think it's worth pointing out that I think a lot of the first 6 months or so in power, there was a sense of failure of preparation for government and a sense of trying out things. And the extraordinary thing was, of course, Labour conference in Liverpool, and talking to veterans who were there in Brighton in 1997 after that landslide Madouin, it was like sort of chalk and cheese, the two mentalities, the two attitudes. And so I do think that when the history of this Labour government is written, the criticism will be that they took too long to sort of work out what they want to do. Now they might be doing a lot more of the stuff. You see a much more assertive line from Shabana Mahmood on things like the Sentencing Council this week. But I do think the lack of preparation and also that sense of inability to get to grips with things, partly also a legacy of 14 years out of government. Lots has changed since 2010, but I think some of the realizations, for instance, the on equality impact assessments, etc., the scales have taken a little bit longer to fall from the eyes than some might have liked initially.
And John, news came earlier today that China has hit back at President Donald Trump's tariffs that he imposed on Wednesday evening. Just in terms of the UK aspect of this, how would you like to see discussions between the UK and the US on these tariffs pan out?
Britain has to act in Britain's national interest. We don't have the weight of being part of the European Union, which was a constraint. You had to get 27 other countries to agree with you, but you're a big player. We're not connected to the US apart from the special relationship. So we get some protection, but not a lot from Trump's sentimentality. And the tariff system that's been brought in isn't actually a reflection of tariffs on either side. It's some reflection of trade deficits, trade balances. And so it's a vandalism, an attack on the global trading system as it is now, We're not going to go back to that. We know that. As in so many other areas, America is losing its leading position. Britain has to calculate now. It's not in our national interest to retaliate. I think for every country in the world, it's the prisoner's dilemma. You're tempted to fight back, but the best thing isn't to fight back because it just escalates. So I do think Britain's taking the right position, holding back, saying we'll always do what's in the right interest for the UK. The question for me is, who's going to rebuild the global system? We know who wants to rebuild the global system, China. We know, I've seen maps of it, China is now the major trading partner of all of Africa. It used to be much more mixed. Africa is now going to be bound more to China, even though historically through the Commonwealth, the African diaspora countries in the Caribbean and the African countries in Africa are very close to the UK. So we need to think where we position ourselves in building the new global system. The Trump system won't last. He'll be a dead duck president, a lame duck president in 2 years' time. He will likely lose the House and likely lose the Senate because of the reaction domestically. He may well give way to another Democrat president. All of this are questions for America. For the UK, can we help to shape the new settlement, a 21st century settlement? I hope a lot of thought is going on in that, because posturing now is not the right thing to do. We will not impact on President Trump, whether he comes to visit King Charles or not. We won't influence the decisions that America make. We have to protect British interests and try to build long-term, maybe even a trading system that we agree with the European Union and China. Because if there's one rogue country, USA, we should ally ourselves with stable countries like China and stable settlement like the European Union. This is a massive moment for geopolitics, and it's that the old world has now gone. We can't restore it, and a Labour government should never think about going back to the past. We're not a Conservative government. What's the future? How could we build it? And that's where a lot of thought. Now, a lot will go on internally, but I think it's time to start sharing some of the trade-offs that's going to have to happen with the public. People will rally around the flag for defence and security. We've shown that over Ukraine. We need to rally around the flag for trade, for industry, and for growth as well.
Thank you, James. Thank you, John. And thank you for listening.